You ever feel like something's watching you? Not with eyes or judgment, but like some invisible thread is tugging you gently toward a moment you haven't met yet? A strange coincidence. A gut feeling that turns out to be right. A door closing that somehow opens a better one. Most people ignore it. They chalk it up to chance. But what if those little moments were actually signals? Not from the world around you, but from a version of you that already exists. This story begins not in a lab or a temple, but in a small apartment where a woman named Evelyn sat quietly every night, talking to the future. She didn't call it that. She thought of it as remembering ahead. She'd close her eyes and picture a life that hadn't happened yet, walking through a garden she'd never seen, laughing with someone she hadn't met, hearing a voice call her name in a language she didn't speak. And the strange part? Pieces of it started showing up. At first, she thought it was just the power of positive thinking, visualization, maybe luck. But the more it happened, the more undeniable it became. It was as if the future was responding to her. Or maybe she was responding to it. Evelyn wasn't spiritual. She wasn't into science either. But one night, out of curiosity, she looked up a term she'd heard in a podcast, quantum entanglement. What she found would change everything. Two particles, born together, then separated. One placed in a lab in New York, the other in a facility across the globe. Change one, and the other responds, instantly. No matter the distance, no message, no delay, just an invisible connection that no one can fully explain. Scientists called it spooky action at a distance. Einstein himself found it unsettling, but the evidence was undeniable. And as Evelyn read deeper, a wild question formed in her mind. If particles could be connected beyond space and time, why not people? Why not consciousness? Why not her? She wasn't just imagining a better life. She was aligning with it. You see, quantum entanglement isn't about magic. It's about resonance, about connection. And what scientists discovered about particles might just apply to something much bigger. Your thoughts, your emotions, your identity. Because here's the truth no one ever told you. You are not separate from the future you desire. You're entangled with it. The question is, are you listening? Imagine waking up each morning and unknowingly tuning a radio station with your thoughts. You don't realize you're doing it, but the station you choose determines what songs play throughout your day. Most people don't realize this station exists. They think life just happens, randomly, without rhythm. But it doesn't, because just like a radio, your subconscious is always transmitting something. And more importantly, it's always receiving. Evelyn started noticing it more and more. On mornings when she felt anxious, her day would spiral. Small delays, strange arguments, missed connections. And on the days when she sat in silence, breathed deeply, and gently reminded herself who she was becoming, things flowed. Strangers smiled at her. She found herself in the right place at the right time. Money came in unexpectedly. Old issues resolved themselves. It was like the world was echoing her. And then one night, she read something that made it click completely. Your subconscious is the antenna. Your emotions are the signal. It was so simple and so powerful. Because while most people try to change their lives with willpower, affirmations, or constant action, Evelyn realized something deeper. It wasn't about doing more. It was about tuning differently. She remembered a documentary she once saw about a man who healed his body not through medicine, but through laughter, gratitude, and visualization. He claimed his recovery wasn't a miracle, it was biology. The body, he said, responds to emotion, and the mind is the bridge. What if reality did the same? What if every time you dwell on frustration, you're wiring your mind to receive more of it? And every time you feel peace, true peace, you're aligning with futures where peace already exists? That's when Evelyn's practice changed. She stopped trying to control outcomes. She stopped trying to manifest from desperation. Instead, she began to feel into the version of her life that felt whole, even when everything outside her was chaotic. And little by little, the external caught up. The truth is, we've been taught to think that the mind is locked inside the skull, that consciousness is just a side effect of the brain. But quantum physics, And people like Evelyn suggest otherwise. Because if your thoughts can ripple through your body, why can't they ripple through the field of reality? Why can't intention travel? Why can't your future self be whispering to you right now, waiting for you to finally tune in? The mistake most people make is this. They wait to feel the emotion after life changes. But the secret Evelyn discovered is this. When you feel it first, life changes in response. Not instantly, not always predictably, but inevitably. Because frequency doesn't lie, and energy always finds a match. There's a famous experiment in quantum physics called the double-slit experiment. It was supposed to be simple, just a test to see how tiny particles behave when fired at a wall with two slits. The expectation? They'd pass through one slit or the other, like marbles through a doorway. But what happened changed everything. Instead of acting like particles, the matter behaved like waves, rippling through both slits simultaneously, creating patterns of interference. It was as if the particles didn't commit to a path until someone actually watched them. And the moment they were observed, the wave collapsed. The particles chose a single slit. The act of observing literally changed the outcome. Now stop and think about that. Just watching altered reality. When Evelyn read about this, she felt a chill down her spine. Because suddenly her quiet nightly ritual made sense. Her thoughts weren't just fantasies. They were collapsing waves of possibility into something real. When she imagined a future as if it were already hers, when she watched it unfold in her mind, she wasn't pretending, she was choosing. And maybe that was all it ever took. Not effort, not chasing, just attention. We're raised to believe that the world exists outside of us, that we are mere passengers, reacting to events we didn't ask for. But what if life is more like that experiment? What if your focus is the measuring device, and reality is waiting for your signal to decide which path to take? Every day, most people are unconsciously observing their fears. They stare at their bank accounts with dread. They look in the mirror with criticism. They scan the future with anxiety. And in doing so, they collapse those timelines into existence. Not on purpose, but by default. Evelyn made a different choice. She began to observe what she wanted, not what she feared. And this shift, subtle as it was, began to change everything. Because when you stop reacting and start observing with intention, you take your power back. Your attention becomes your most sacred currency, your focus, your wand. And this is where the story takes a deeper turn, because it's not just about seeing a better life. It's about becoming the version of you who already lives it. That's the key. The future isn't waiting. It's available. Right now. In this moment. In this breath. And your job isn't to force it into being. Your job is to tune to the version that already exists. Evelyn realized something else that night. She wasn't chasing dreams. She was remembering them, like echoes from a parallel timeline, whispering, "We're already here. Just feel us." And once she stopped doubting, the world responded faster than she ever imagined. If you've ever held a radio just slightly off frequency, you know how frustrating it is. You can hear the song, but it's fuzzy, static, words bleeding into noise. All it takes is a tiny adjustment, a flick of the wrist, and suddenly the sound becomes clear, clean, alive. Your subconscious works the same way. Most people don't realize that 95% of their thoughts, behaviors, and emotions are driven by subconscious programs, not conscious intention. That's why someone can say, "I want to be happy," but still wake up heavy every day. It's why a person can work hard, do everything right, and yet keep hitting the same invisible wall. The antenna is out of tune. It's not broken. It's just broadcasting a frequency that doesn't match the life they want. Evelyn didn't know the science behind it at first. She didn't need to. What she felt was enough. But later, when she explored the studies, it only confirmed what her intuition had been showing her all along. The subconscious isn't local. It isn't bound to your brain. It's a field, a living, breathing web of patterns, energy, and expectation. And it stretches far beyond your skin. In fact, scientists have measured the electromagnetic field of the human heart, and it extends several feet beyond the body. Your thoughts don't stay inside your head. They ripple. Your feelings are broadcasts. So when Evelyn started tuning her internal world, the external one began to shift. Not because she forced it, but because she stopped arguing with it. She stopped sending out the signal of fear, of waiting, of not enough. And she started radiating a quiet, confident knowing. She began each day not by asking, "What do I need to do?" but "Who am I becoming today?" And that changed everything. Because action from a place of fear produces more fear. But action from a place of alignment, that produces magic. Imagine waking up and instead of rushing into the world like a warrior trying to win a war, you start with stillness. You listen. You visualize. You feel the future. Not as a wish, but as a memory. You ask yourself, if I already had everything I wanted, how would I move today? What would I say? What would I let go of? That's not delusion. That's entrainment. That's embodiment. Because life doesn't give you what you want. It mirrors what you are. And the only way to shift your reality is to shift your resonance. Evelyn began to carry herself differently, not dramatically, just quietly, like someone who knew something the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. She smiled more, spoke less, and strangely, people noticed. Opportunities flowed to her, not in floods but in moments. Little miracles that seemed unremarkable on the surface, but stitched together to form an entirely new life. And when people asked what she was doing differently, she'd just smile and say, "I stopped living from memory. I started living from possibility." Because that's what tuning your subconscious really is. It's not about pretending, it's about remembering. Remembering who you truly are before the world told you otherwise. There's a version of you that's comfortable in struggle. It's not your fault. It was trained into you by parents, teachers, heartbreaks, failures, and disappointments. Over time, it became your identity. The familiar pain, the repeated patterns, the quiet belief that maybe this is all life is meant to be. But that version, it's just a program, a memory playing itself on repeat, and you can interrupt it. That's what Evelyn did, deliberately, gently, and consistently. She began what she called the quiet reset. Each morning before her feet hit the ground, she asked herself one simple question: is today a rerun or a reinvention? And if the answer felt like another rerun, same thoughts, same worries, same emotional playlist, she paused. She sat still, closed her eyes, and started letting go of the old broadcast. Not by force, but by no longer feeding it. This is the part most people miss. You don't have to fight the old you. You just have to stop rehearsing it. Evelyn imagined every limiting belief. I'm not ready. I don't deserve that. Nothing ever works out for me. As little strings tangled around her energy. Every breath she took was a pair of scissors, snipping, releasing, clearing space. And in that space, she made room for someone new. Not a fantasy, not a fake version, but the real her, the version that had always been there beneath the noise. When you let go of who you're not, who you are rises naturally. She started walking differently, making choices that didn't make logical sense, but felt incredibly aligned. Saying yes to things she once feared, saying no to things she once tolerated. And the universe, it noticed. Because when you step out of the story of who you've been, you stop attracting people and experiences that match the old script. New characters appear, new plot lines unfold, and most importantly, the ending changes. This is what's known in neuroscience as neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. But on a deeper level, it's the quantum field responding to your new signal. Because when you embody a new identity, the world has no choice but to reflect it. And that's what Evelyn was now living. A life that once felt like fiction, slowly becoming fact. Not because she chased it, but because she aligned with it. Here's the most important truth she discovered, and maybe it's the only one that matters. You don't manifest what you want, you manifest what you are. Somewhere in the infinite sea of possibilities, there is a version of you that's already living the life you dream about. They're not struggling to believe. They're not questioning their worth. They're simply existing in ease and flow and alignment. That version is real. And the secret Evelyn discovered is that you're not separate from that self. You're entangled. Quantum entanglement, in the scientific sense, means that two particles, once connected, remain linked no matter how far apart they travel. Change one, and the other shifts instantly. There's no visible bridge, but the connection is undeniable. Now stretch that truth. What if time is just another illusion? What if distance means nothing in the energetic realm? What if the version of you who already has what you desire is sending signals, and your job is to listen? That's what Evelyn began practicing daily, not visualizing, not hoping, but communing with her future self. She'd sit in silence, close her eyes, and breathe into the energy of already done. She'd feel the clothes on her skin, hear the sounds of a life fully lived, sense the lightness in her chest, the confidence in her stride, the love in her heart, and with each session, the space between her current self and her future, one dissolved a little more. People started asking her how she changed so quickly, how she seemed to be glowing, attracting blessings effortlessly. She'd smile and say, "I didn't chase anything. I just caught up to myself." Because in truth, she didn't become someone new. She let herself remember who she had always been before fear, guilt, and logic got in the way. This is how entanglement works, not through force, but through feeling, through trust, through frequency. If you want to connect with a higher version of yourself, you must speak their language. And that language isn't effort, it's energy. So Evelyn made a ritual out of it. Each night before bed, she'd whisper a phrase, "I'm already there." And she'd fall asleep not hoping for a better life, but relaxing into one. Here's what she learned. The quantum field doesn't need to be impressed. It only needs to be aligned with. It's not listening to your words, it's matching your vibration. And when that match is made, reality bends. Not in dramatic explosions, but in quiet, seamless transitions. Emails from unexpected sources, opportunities that seem tailor-made, healing without explanation, synchronicities that make your spine tingle. Because when you match the energy of your future, the future starts matching you. Most people think transformation is about change, but it's really about remembering. It's not about stacking more habits, reading more books, or perfecting morning routines. It's about peeling back what isn't you and allowing what's always been waiting underneath to rise to the surface. Evelyn didn't wake up one day and become someone new. She simply stopped feeding the person she no longer wanted to be. And that's the final step, perhaps the most misunderstood of all: patience. Not the kind of patience that waits in suffering, but the kind that waits in knowing. The kind that says, reality is catching up. I've already arrived. You see, when you shift your frequency, your world doesn't always rearrange instantly. Sometimes the old momentum still plays out a little longer, like the final notes of a song still echoing after the music has stopped. But the difference now is you. Evelyn would walk through her day with an inner smile, not because everything was perfect, but because everything felt intentional. Even the setbacks felt like choreography. Even delays felt like divine timing. She no longer asked, "Why is this happening to me?" She asked, "What is this preparing me for?" She stopped resisting, stopped controlling, stopped micromanaging the mystery. And in that surrender, she found a power greater than anything she had tried to force before. One morning, years into her quiet transformation, Evelyn stood at the edge of a cliff in a country she'd never dreamed she'd visit. The ocean roared below. The wind whipped through her hair, and she realized she was living the life she once whispered into the dark. No vision board could have predicted this. No 5-year plan would have mapped the path. Because the real magic hadn't come from the doing. It had come from the tuning, from aligning, from choosing again and again to feel, embody, and trust the version of herself who was already living the dream. And now, she wasn't chasing life. Life was chasing her. There's something sacred about letting go of struggle. For most of us, it's hardwired into our identities. The idea that hard work is the only path, that if something comes easily, it must not be real. That transformation must hurt. But Evelyn's story revealed a deeper truth, one that most people never discover until they've tried everything else. You don't need to suffer to evolve. You need to shift. Struggle often comes from misalignment, not misfortune. It's the friction between who you've been and who you're becoming. And the more you cling to the old self, the harder the journey feels. But the moment you surrender, not in weakness, but in wisdom, everything starts to flow. Evelyn began to live by a new mantra: energy before action, frequency before form. She didn't wait until she had evidence to believe. She believed until the evidence appeared. She stopped trying to prove herself and instead started being herself. Every day she asked one question: what would my future self do today? And that became her compass. When faced with a decision, she'd pause and tune in. Not to logic, but to alignment. She didn't ask what's smart, she asked what's true. This is how reality rearranges itself, not through force, but through frequency. And slowly the choices became easier. The confusion faded. The resistance dissolved. She wasn't reacting to life anymore. She was creating it from the inside out. Because once your subconscious is programmed for the new you, effort becomes a byproduct, not a burden. Action flows from identity, and you no longer need discipline to do what already feels natural. That's the real shift. Not that Evelyn learned to do more, but that she became someone for whom alignment was normal. Abundance was expected. Peace was her baseline. Not a rare gift, but a new home. And every time she met a challenge, she no longer asked, "What's wrong?" She asked, "Which frequency am I tuning into?" That question changed everything, because the issue was never the situation. It was the signal. And when she retuned, the path would open again. Not perfectly, but precisely. One afternoon, Evelyn sat at a cafe, watching people move past the window, rushing, scrolling, talking without really listening. She used to be one of them, caught in the same loops, running toward things she didn't even want, trying to escape feelings she hadn't named. But now she saw the world differently. She didn't see problems. She saw patterns, not as punishment, but as portals. And through this lens, even pain had meaning. Across from her sat a friend who hadn't seen her in years. His eyes were wide as she told him her story. Not the highlight reel, but the quiet unraveling and reassembly. How she stopped chasing love and became love. How she stopped fighting scarcity and started embodying abundance. How she stopped wishing for peace and began radiating it. "You sound so calm," he said, "but also powerful, like something changed deep inside." She smiled. "It's not magic," she replied. "It's memory." "Memory of what?" "Of who I really am." And as he looked at her, he didn't see the same woman. He saw someone radiant, rooted, magnetic, someone who didn't need to convince anyone of anything, because her energy spoke louder than her words. That's the thing most people don't understand about transformation. It's not about proof, it's about presence. You don't need to show off when you're aligned. The shift becomes visible. You walk differently, breathe differently. Even silence carries weight. And the people around you, they feel it. Some will be drawn to you, others will fall away. Not because you've changed, but because you've returned to who you were before the world told you to be someone else. This is what Evelyn had become. Not a new person, but an embodied version of her truest self. And that version didn't need to force or beg or prove. She simply lived, and life responded. There's a question we rarely ask ourselves, but once you hear it, it changes everything. Which future am I choosing with my energy today? Not with your words, not with your goals, but with your being. Evelyn realized something profound near the end of her journey, not just about herself, but about everyone. We're all already creating reality, constantly, automatically. Most of us are just doing it unconsciously, replaying the same thoughts, the same fears, the same stories, and calling it fate. But it's not fate, it's familiarity. And familiarity isn't freedom. Every thought is a vote. Every emotion is a frequency. And your subconscious is the ballot box. Whatever you rehearse the most, that becomes your truth. That's the real quantum secret. It's not about hacking the universe. It's about realizing you already are the universe, expressing itself through you. Every time you shift internally, you create ripples externally. Every time you raise your vibration, the field responds. Not as a reward, but as a reflection. Evelyn once thought she had to earn her transformation. Now she knew better. She only had to allow it, to stop resisting the pull of her highest timeline, to stop doubting the whisper that said, you were meant for more, and to stop outsourcing power to people, systems, or circumstances that never understood her potential. You have that same whisper. Maybe you've heard it late at night when everything is quiet and your mind finally stops running. Maybe you've felt it in moments of stillness when you catch a glimpse of a life that feels strangely familiar, though you've never lived it. That version of you isn't fantasy, it's frequency, and you get to choose whether you tune in or keep hitting snooze. So here's the question Evelyn asked herself one final time. If everything I want already exists in another version of me, what would I do today to meet her halfway? Ask yourself that. Let it guide your next breath, your next step, your next decision. Because reality isn't something happening to you. It's something happening from you. Always. The most beautiful part of Evelyn's transformation wasn't the things she gained. It was what she no longer needed. She no longer needed to be right. She no longer needed external validation. She no longer needed the chase. All of that quietly dissolved. What remained was peace. Not a passive, boring peace, but a magnetic, radiant one. The kind that draws everything you once chased, not because you demand it, but because you no longer resist it. She realized something that changed her forever. I didn't change my life. I changed my frequency, and life changed in response. You see, life doesn't care how hard you try. It cares how aligned you are. Because alignment is the language of the field. It's the silent, invisible handshake between your inner world and the universe. And now Evelyn lived every moment as a handshake, a partnership, a dance between possibility and presence. She had become the observer, the signal, the entangled self. And she no longer lived from fear of missing out, but from the joy of being tuned in. This is the invitation extended to you now, not just to learn, but to live this, to stop chasing outcomes and start choosing frequencies, to stop waiting for permission and start resonating with the version of you who doesn't need to ask. Because that version, they're already living the life you want. All they're waiting for is for you to match the signal. And when you do, life bends, doors open, synchronicities cascade. The world you thought was out of reach moves toward you with quiet grace. So let this be your final mantra, whispered tonight as you drift into sleep. I'm already there. I remember now. I allow it all. Because the moment you choose to believe, not with your mind, but with your being, the field begins to shift. The particles collapse. The old identity dissolves. And the new reality? It rises, seamlessly, effortlessly, inevitably. If this story stirred something inside you, share it in the comments below. Let someone else feel your resonance. And if you're ready to align with stories like this, subscribe. Because this isn't just a channel, it's a field, one we're building together.